Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a beat for rappers like Lil Keed or Lil Gotit. So it's going to be super melodic, pretty atmospheric, and really give the artist a lot of space to find pockets within the beat so that they can kind of slide or flow through the song. Let's jump into it. So to get things started real quick, the tempo I have set at 116 and the key is in F sharp minor. When I'm making a beat for a more melodic artist like Lil Keed or Lil Gotit, the first thing I do is start with the melodies. The melodies are really the driving force behind the song, and while the drums are really important, I feel like personally they play more of a supportive role. The drums matter a lot, but the melody is really like the heart of the song. So real quick, I use 5 main instruments in this song: a guitar accent, a kalimba, an arpeggio, and a pad. When all of them are playing together, except for the arpeggio, because it actually clashes with the melody, it sounds like this. So to start, I have a guitar. It's called Moon Guitar 1, and I got this out of Spitfire's Labs VST. So this is the MIDI pattern, and I'll walk you through kind of how I make a melody like this. I actually started with the bass notes. In this case, I started on an F. The reason I start with like the root notes or the bass notes of the guitar is because this is really like the core of the melody. So you want to make sure that this by itself at least sounds decent. After that, what I did is I just went in and drew out like an ascending counter melody and played together. You get this. The next sound I added was out of Spitfire Labs. This one is called Lap Steel Resonance Chaos. And this is just like a really kind of ambient, creepy, distorted sound. So what I did with that was just a very simple MIDI pattern that when played with the melody, it helps add some ambience to the beat. It helps add some texture to the beat. And it's a way of bringing energy into the beat without making things that much more complicated. So both of them played at the same time. The next layer to the melody I have is a kalimba, and this is just a kalimba out of Contact. It's playing the same chords as the guitar, but I just filled the chords out and then created like a bit of a rhythmic groove with them. The next layer to the melody I have is an arpeggio out of Omnisphere called Purple Drops. The final layer of the melodies is a pad called Starlight that I got out of Omnisphere. Once again, it's the same chords that are being played like with all the other layers. Those are all of the layers in the melodies that I use. I'll get into like the order that I bring them in and out throughout the beat in a little bit. So now let's talk mixing. On the guitar, I have an EQ, a little bit of one knob wetter, some neo-verb on it, primarily dry, and then I have RC20 on it. The other part of the guitar that's noteworthy is I have it at 45% mono, just to help bring it through the mix, because there are a lot of layers in the melody. I want to make sure that it comes through. For the guitar accent, I have Pancake 2 going at 68%, just an EQ to cut the lows and boost the mids and a little bit of the highs. On the kalimba, I have Pro Q3. I have one knob wetter again. I have Comeback Kid with a ping pong slap delay. And then I have an EQ on it. Then on the arpeggio, I have an EQ. These are just frequency cuts. Like there were certain frequencies that were sticking out and I didn't really want them to come through. So I just have those cut out. I have one knob wetter and I have Fruity Chorus just with the default preset turned down to 40%. And finally, I have the pad. I just have Super VHS with the magic knob turned on and an EQ. So I have all of the melodies being routed to a melody bus with Neutron 3's vintage multiband preset, which is an EQ and a multiband compressor, and once again, one knob wetter. I also have all of the layers of the melody except for the pad routed to a reverb bus where I have neoverb and an EQ. Don't forget to EQ your reverbs and your delays. Then I have the guitar and the kalimba routed to a delay bus with Comeback Kid and an EQ on it. So that's all of the melodies. So now we get to the fun part, the drums. Lil Keed and Lil Gotit are both really melodic rappers, so I used a short 808 and gave it a lot of movement. And I use this movement to try to create tension and release throughout the pattern. I do use a kick pretty sparingly throughout this beat. I don't like to use a kick too often because I think that can sound like too aggressive depending on the vibe that you're going for. I have the kick hitting in certain pockets that the 808 doesn't hit to keep the bounce and the energy. And then I also have the kick hitting at the same time as the 808 at certain points to emphasize it. So right there, like the 808 doesn't hit. Next, I'll cover the snares and the percussion. The snare pattern is just very straightforward. I have a bounce snare hitting before the regular snare. And then I also have a bongo. I like to put a percussion hitting right before the snare because I think it helps add a lot of bounce to the percussion sections. Next, I have 3 different hi-hat patterns playing. The first one is just a basic 2-step pattern. The next one is a little more rhythmic. It's not hitting on every 2-step, but I tried to fill the pockets to help create some bounce. And the final hi-hat pattern that I have is this one. This one is pretty much just a 2-step with a couple of extra rolls. And these rolls right here, I like to cut out the first little section of the hi-hat so it just introduces the pattern. Finally, we have 2 types of open hi-hats. The first one is just a really basic short hat. The second one is a longer open hat that hits at the same time as the 808. Alright, now I'll show you how I mix the drums. I like to take all of my drums and route them to a drum bus. Because of this, I don't actually put a lot on my actual drums. It's just I make sure to gain stage everything and then put on EQs. And for the open hi-hats, I tend to just throw on like one knob wetter or another type of reverb so they're not as harsh. Then on the drum bus, I have Neutron's Essential Mix Bus, which is just an EQ and a compressor. So now let's talk about song structure. In this beat, I used a 16-bar intro because the melodies play such an important part of creating the mood or the feel or the vibe of the song that I wanted to make sure that they had time to help set the mood and, introduce them properly. Also, if my project looks kind of weird, my laptop was going through it, so I just rendered everything out, but I kept the patterns in here so you guys could see what I'm doing. So the first 8 bars of the intro is just the melodies, and then in the second 8 bar, I start by bringing in the hi-hats, then the snare, and then an 808 roll. right before the hook starts. So that build up sounds like this. Basically, I just wanted to help like set the mood and set the tone. And then right before the hook comes in, suddenly bring in a nice amount of energy with the 808. So typically speaking, I divide my hooks into like two 8-bar sections. The first 8-bar, I like to only have some of the elements going. And then in the second 8-bar, I introduce new elements that subtly kind of change the feel of the hook. So in the first 8 bars of the hook, I have the guitar accent, and the kalimba playing, which all together sound like this. Then in the second 8 bars, I also bring in the pad. So the pad is only in the second 8 bars because I didn't want to add too much and make the beat cluttered, but I still wanted to add another element to just help change the feel very slightly. Just like with the melodies for the drums, I tend to split things off into the first 8 bars and the second 8 bars. In this case, for the first 8 bars, I have the 808, the snare, the bongo, the hi-hat, the short open hat, and the longer open hats. And then the second 8 bars, I add in the kick and the bounce snare. But because I added those in, I changed the hi-hat pattern from the more complicated hi-hat number 3, which has a lot of rolls, and swap that out for just a standard 2-step hi-hat pattern. The reason I do this is to just help kind of introduce a slightly different bounce in the second 8 bars so that the beat isn't too repetitive, but I don't want to change things up too much because you still want it to feel like the hook section. Altogether, this section sounds like this. Notice I like to delay when the hi-hat hits because I like the 808 to really shine through and it emphasizes like the start of the hook. Then here, add in the kick and the bounce snare, but simplify the hi-hat. So just generally speaking, I like to have the first 8 bars be a little lighter than the second 8 bars. And then for the second 8 bars, I like to increase the energy a bit, typically through adding in a little percussion and then maybe like a light pad in the background. So for the verse section, the first 8 bars of it, I have the guitar move from the primary melody to more of the supporting melody. And the way I did this was by taking the MIDI pattern from the guitar and pasting that MIDI into the kalimba to make that the primary melody. And then I just have the guitar playing at certain points to accent or to support what the kalimba is doing. Because I didn't have the arpeggio going at all during the hook section, this is a great time to introduce that element into the beat and help bring a new layer to it. So that sounds like this. Then in the second 8 bars, I have the MIDI pattern from the kalimba in the hook section. I pasted that into the guitar. I dropped out the kalimba altogether. I continued the ARP. I have the pad playing just as a little accent piece, and that sounds like this. So just like with the hook section, I tend to divide my verse into 2 or 3 different little 8-bar sections that go together, but they're not identical. So I introduce a new 808 pattern. I have the snare going as usual. I introduce the bongo during 2 little sections. And then I have the bouncier hi-hat pattern that I mentioned earlier playing You'll notice that I put the kick in here just at 2 little sections, and this is just to add a little more bounce without having the kick playing through the whole thing and being too aggressive. So it's just hitting in a couple spots where the 808 isn't. The verse section sounds like this. Finally, we have the pre-hook section. The pre-hook section, or bridge, or whatever you want to call it, is a really good time to just kind of really strip things back. It just helps reset the energy of the track and help build back up into the energy that the hook will bring. So it's giving the beat some time to breathe, it's giving the song some time to breathe, it's giving the artist some time to almost reset before they go back into the hook. So for this section, I dropped the guitar completely and I just go with the accent guitar, the kalimba, the arpeggio, and the pad. For the drums, I dropped the 808, but I didn't want to lose too much of the energy that's created from like a bass. So I added in the sub bass, and right before the hook comes back in, I bring in the hi-hat, the snare, and the 808, and that sounds like this. Yeah, so that's how you make a Lil Gotit or Lil Keed or Gunna or any other type of super melodic rapper type beat. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. I plan on getting these videos out, once every 1 to 2 weeks or something like that. If you liked this video, go ahead and leave a like. Make sure you subscribe. If you want to see a certain type of tutorial, go ahead and leave a comment. But other than that, yeah, hope you enjoyed. Thanks.
Luke, you made this beat?